Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Apologies for the small technical glitch we had, but we're here to answer all your questions. Welcome, Anubha. We are delighted to have with us Dr. Anubha Majithia. Anubha is a mom of two and a practicing clinical psychologist. She has a PhD from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. Welcome, Anubha. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Upasna. Hi, Neela. Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure entirely. As most of you know, Anubha is the author of this book. It's called Five Mistakes Parents Make. I think my children will agree that the list is much more than five, but let's not go there now. And let's get started into the discussion. If you have any questions, please share it in the comment section and we'll try our best to answer as many as we can. So, Anubha, I would love to see a mother who's not worried about her child. So, let's hope some of today's conversation guides our viewers. I'm going to start off with the very first and I think the most eye-grabbing question, which is you mentioned why screen time is not bad for your child. I'm repeating, why screen time is not bad for your child. So please elaborate.
Thanks, Upasna. So, there's a flaw which we have, which we basically internalized from a very young age about seeing things in black and white or seeing things in a dichotomy. So when we say something is good or something is bad, we're not really seeing that there's a range. So it's not about screen time being good or screen time being bad. It's about maintaining a balance. So why it's not bad is because it's given us this opportunity to learn even when we were in a lockdown, in a pandemic. Our children were engaged through the virtual medium. They were able to have their classes uninterrupted. They were also able to talk to their friends. I was able to do therapy sessions online. So I think there are a lot of benefits also which come with the screen because you can see educational videos. My 4-year-old learned her phonics from videos on YouTube where they were singing along and she was able to pick up the pronunciation. There are teenagers who are also part of a lot of forums these days where they are also able to even open up about their sexuality. I had a few clients who were feeling very closeted, and when they joined these forums online they felt that there were others out there who had like similar stories. And recently a client of mine came out to her parents, and it was very liberating experience, and that was because she felt I was not alone. There were others there to support me. So I feel online content has its advantages in terms of educational videos, in terms of forums. You and I are discussing via the screen also. So if it was really bad, we wouldn't be connected today, right? But at the same time, we need to always look at a balance. So when we talk about screen time, what's harmful is passive screen time. So we need to understand what's active screen time and what's passive screen time. Active is when the child is engaged. For instance, the virtual class is an active screen time. Passive is that you're just watching, let's say, a YouTube video one after the other after the other. The child isn't really learning anything. He or she is just flipping. Or for instance, we're just binge watching a series. That's passive viewing. So children who are about 2 to 5 years of age, the WHO has guidelines for them that their passive screen time should be about an hour. And for kids who are older, it should be about 2 hours, not more than that.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting.
So that's why we say that all screen time isn't bad. Active screen time isn't bad, but too much of passive screen time is bad. And I have this mantra, for every hour of screen time, add about 3 of the real time in their lives. So that's a great way to maintain the balance.
That's an interesting fact. So you're able to do that with your children?
Yes, I am.
Fabulous, really. That's something else. Okay, that's great. What happens, Anubha, when, as you say, a child has too many things? Access also to too many things.
So I'm glad you brought this up, Upasna, because, a while back I had read a quote by Swami Chinmayananda saying that you should invest in your child and not on your child. So it caught my attention because from a very young age, we're giving them that concept that happiness can be bought, or happiness is something that you purchase in the form of a toy, in form of an activity class, in form of a service. But a lot of the things in life are actually free. The other thing is that when you have too much, it basically affects your motivation and adjustment. So why do we want certain things is because we are motivated, we're setting goals. We would like this, we would like that. So we work towards it. If you give everything to the child, he or she doesn't have that motivation to work towards anything. So it's called the little emperor syndrome these days in psychology. And the other bit is that, there are adjustment issues. You as a mom can give everything to the child and make things as pushy and comfy. But in the school, he or she may not have that. I mean, in a preschool, the child may have another child who wants to come and take the toy. Or for instance, later on when they're teenagers, they're used to having everything, and then suddenly somebody likes somebody else and they're rejected and they cannot take it. So that whole concept of not having enough is very important, because failure is an inherent part of our life, and that little bit not being there motivates us to set higher goals, to achieve something in life.
Great, great. I guess also when they go away to college, they are on their own and they're still children per se. They are not, full-fledged adults. So that's important even then. Okay, coming to one topic that's very often discussed, food, Anubha.
Oh yeah.
I've seen a lot of moms overfeeding. Like I've seen them serve their child's plate. In my opinion, I feel it's too much. How do you manage the way your child eats? What would you recommend?
So I've been through hit and trial myself. So I've been able to blend my experiences from theory and practice both. Because earlier on, I mean, I used to find it very absurd, why are moms chasing after the child to constantly eat? And if the child's not eating, it used to raise their anxiety. So initially, there is this whole concept, that the child should not go hungry and should not get dehydrated. So that anxiety is very much a part of our lives. And I've also been through that stage, where you feel that, oh, I have to make him or her eat healthy, so might as well put him in front of a screen and then keep on feeding him without him knowing what he's eating or what she's eating. But I realized over time that, that was not a very healthy tactic, because the children were getting dependent on me, and the second thing was there was wastage, and the third important bit was that they didn't know what they were eating. So when we say that moms are overfeeding, you're basically taking that thing away from the child to tell you what's like a cutoff point. We all know when we are satiated, but when we're sitting in front of the screen or somebody's constantly feeding us, that satiety mechanism gets, recalibrated. So with my kids, what I started doing was that my husband and I made it a point that we eat on the table. Nobody is having screens on the table. So I used to involve them in the process that, one of them is in charge of putting the plates. The other is in charge of, okay, fine, to see the cutleries in place. Then we sit together, we eat. And after we've eaten, they get screen time. So it becomes like a, let's say, reinforcement mechanism for eating healthy.
Yeah.
And they serve themselves. So they make a mess. That's okay. But they learn to take in the amount they want to. And I've seen them change and recalibrate. So sometimes my son would overserve himself. So then he was not able to finish. So then we pointed it out that, you need to finish, but it doesn't mean that you have to just stuff yourself and make yourself sick, but it's about portion sizes. So these are small tips, that you can incorporate, get the children involved in table setting, help them sit with you, have meals together on the table without your screens. Parents also are using the screen many times when they're eating.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Use the screen time, or use whatever it is, let's say a play time, or let's say a conversation with a friend, as an incentive for eating healthy. And if let's say my kids were very fussy about some food, we would just follow the 1 spoon rule. That, okay, just take 1 spoon, you just have to eat this much. So slowly, they developed a healthier palate. My son was a very fussy eater, so I've been there. I'm not like preaching as an expert. I've been through that whole stage, but I feel overfeeding a child doesn't help. And overfeeding a lot of the times happens because you are either dependent on the helper constantly filling your child's tummy, or you are just putting them in front of the screen, and they're passively eating without understanding when they're satiated. So that leads to childhood obesity and other myriad of problems like that.
I always recommend a table. I still do it at home. So I think that's a wonderful tip, really, to sit at a dining table together and eat. Anubha, we've seen very early access to social media for children these days. So, what are the repercussions of this?
So, Basna, that's a very valid point that you've brought across, because social media platforms have an age limit or like an age restriction, which is not followed a lot of the times. Parents are putting out videos of their kids, they're making them pout, they're sharing a lot of information about their children, just called sharenting these days. That, constantly you're telling the child to pose, constantly you're making videos, or you're engaging the child is saying like and subscribe to my channel, he doesn't really know what it means. And we are exposing them to a virtual world which is made up of people they don't know. So a lot of the time your self-esteem starts getting linked to these likes, which is a problem, because you don't know these people. You've got trolling which is happening at a very young age. Kids are joining social media by faking their age, and then they're trolled, or they are being engaged by strangers. Child trafficking is a big problem that we are all facing, and you see that these days you're providing them with an open catalog. You're sharing which school your child goes to, the child is sharing what he or she likes, the child is sharing pictures of their room, your house, everywhere. You're basically letting people invade your privacy on your own. So those dangers are not understood by a small child. A parent can understand them better and educate the child. So if they are saying that before 13 the child should not be engaged in social media, that's because the brain isn't mature enough to know what's right, what's wrong, how much to share, how much to keep. So I feel that is a very big growing concern these days, and especially in the pandemic I saw a lot of young kids being exposed to making videos and all. It was heartbreaking, because this is the age where they should be out there and not in here all the time, and seeking adulation from people they've not even seen.
That is a tough one indeed. I have a comment from Astuti, my colleague. She says, my 9-year-old daughter says, I don't want it, rather than getting motivated when I don't give her something. What would be your thoughts on that, Anubha?
Can you come again, Upasana? There was a little lag.
Okay, Astuti says, my 9-year-old daughter says, I don't want it, rather than getting motivated when I don't give her something.
Okay, so that's fair enough. So the thing is, a lot of the times the children will throw a tantrum to basically test your limits, whether you'll give in. So you say, like, for instance, a lot of the times my daughter or my son will also say, okay, fine, I don't want it. I say, okay, fine, that's fine. I give them a lag time. And then I tell them, okay, this is the thing which I would like you to do to get this. And if you're okay with it, sometimes later on they will come back and they will agree to conditions. But at that time, it's just a tantrum. So don't mollycoddle them and say, no, 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 it's okay. Don't get upset. Let them be frustrated, let them be upset, but let them come back to you on it. So don't engage in that push and pull. They will come back.
Great. I have another question from Mandeep Sandhu. She says, I have twins and we are in a nuclear family. Also, I'm a working mom. These days, kids are not going out to play. They're getting impatient and angry and frustrated very frequently. What should be done, and how should I, as a mom, handle the situation? Do you want me to read it again, Anubha?
No, I think I got it. It's about basically channeling their energies in a positive way, right? So
She says they are not going out to play nowadays.
So one thing which I can share with you is, this is a very common problem which is happening when children are, closeted in the house the whole day. They become irritated and restless. So what we started doing is, we started even playing, what do you say, pakran pakrai and things like that at home. So they are running around the place. It's about channelizing their energy. So some days we do like an art and craft with them whenever we get the time. So I understand you're a working mom, I'm too, and it becomes difficult. But whenever I get the time to kind of engage with them, at that particular time, I make sure that I'm like channelizing their physical energy. By either they're running around the house and we're chasing each other to kind of play catch, or we are kind of, doing something which is more hands-on with an art and craft activity. Or sometimes we have story sessions where I will tell my 4-year-old, why don't you narrate a story to us today? Or tell my other one to narrate a story. In that way, we are coming up with different mechanisms, which is again a hit and trial of how to keep them engaged. So when you see that something's working, do that more often. But if you feel that something they're not taking to, then don't push it. If it works for somebody, it doesn't have to work for you. So like, for instance, the running around was working for us. I have a friend of mine who got like a mini trampoline and the kids were just jumping on top of that. Another one, they were doing, the things when we were kids, doing hopscotch with,
Right.
let's say the chalk. So people are coming up with different ways in which you can have those outdoor activities replicated in an indoor space. So
I
more
agree.
physical activity, the more their energies would get channelized and the more the aggression comes down.
I agree with you. I have two teenagers, Anubha, and during the entire lockdown, when we couldn't even go down from our apartment, we would do like a little dance workout or a walk video, and sometimes for the walk video, we would mute the sound and play like Bollywood music. So, it was like that was our motivation to listen to 5, 6 songs and do that walking. So you have to find a way. Like we've also put up a lot of ideas on our website actually, on lockdown.
It's about finding your zen. Na? It's about like some kids take to yoga, some kids take to just running around, some kids take to just jumping up and down, some take to dancing. But I feel, whatever's working for the child, do that a little more rather than, just trying out every idea in the box just because some other parent is doing that.
True, very true. So Anubha, another thing that we see, as you were talking about, younger kids taking photographs, self-esteem and selfies. What's the correlation here?
It's a deadly correlation because you've seen a lot of selfie deaths also happening, by the way, in the media. People are trying to take selfies from dangerous angles and they end up losing their lives also. That's like the extreme of, taking dangerous selfies. But a lot of the times when you're taking selfies, these days, you're using an angle where you appear attractive. You're using filters to not, show any flaws which are there. So everything's very perfect in the selfie world, but we are all imperfect, so it's time to embrace our imperfections and draw self-esteem from our own strengths and weaknesses rather than somebody who's commenting on your selfie or somebody who's kind of making you feel great because if you held the camera at a particular angle then you appear attractive. So selfies are becoming like this way where people are kind of addressing body image issues in an airbrushed manner. So it's important to not attach your self-esteem to selfies, because a lot of the times when you're saying that, okay, if I hide my acne and I'm getting the likes, that selfie looks good. But when I go out in public, I don't like going out because my acne show and people stare. Then I feel there's like a big gap between your real self and your ideal self.
So basically, no filter is the way to go.
No filters, embrace your flaws.
I so agree with that one. I have Monalika, again, my colleague, who says my 8-year-old has started making her own decisions these days. Of course, I agree under my supervision, but is it the right age to just let them go ahead sometimes when we as a parent don't want to?
So you have to weigh. 8 years is a younger age group. Like for instance, I have a 4.5-year-old. So from a very young age, with my elder son also is around 7, we've always, handheld them and encouraged them to make decisions. Because if they don't make decisions, they are not going to achieve that sense of independence, which is also very necessary, and get that self-confidence or that self-efficacy. I can make decisions, I can do something right on my own, but it has to be done, as you're saying, under supervision. So for instance, even if, let's say, my daughter is allowed to pick out her clothes in the morning, or she's allowed to kind of, let's say, select let's say which sabji she wants to eat, there are two healthy vegetables there, she's allowed to make the decisions. But if I feel that at times she is misusing her decision making and she is kind of let's say totally all over the place or making a wrong decision, it's my job to kind of gently inform her and tell her that okay, look, the best way is you don't confront her and say no. You just say, okay, there are two ways in which we can go about this. If we go this way, then these things will be the benefits you draw of it. But if we go this way, these will be the benefits. So if you do like a pros cons kind of a thing very gently with the child, then they are able to also take your opinion rather than just bulldozing them and saying no, you don't know how to make a decision, or just going with them completely. So that you have to discern as a parent for an 8-year-old. The 8-year-old doesn't have that kind of a maturity to be able to take the right decision.
Yeah, and I think more than telling them off, lead them to the right answer. Moms are very clever at doing these things. So I'm sure you'll find a way. I have a lot of questions, Anubha, from viewers. So I'm just going to go ahead and.
Sure.
Yeah. So Ruchi Jain says, my elder one is in the US for his high school. He went there as it was his wish. I feel he is happy there, but his connect with family is not that great. I understand he's busy, but I still feel that he is drifting away from us. What should I do? I miss him so much. In fact, he gets irritated if I try to call him and message him.
So a great way to do that is, see, a lot of the times we are calling or we are messaging like, that, you want in touch, or you should stay more in touch. A better approach I've found when you're communicating is using the communication sandwich approach. So when you are speaking to your son the next time, first is ask him that when is a good time. I wanted to discuss something with you. Let him pick that time so that he's more receptive rather than you calling and he getting irritated. The other thing is start with an appreciatory note. Like, it was so nice that day, you gave me a call or we had a conversation about that. And I understand you're busy, but sometimes, I miss you a lot. And would it be, possible if we can just have like a check-in once a week or whenever you're free, so that, I don't feel that you're drifting away, or I don't start fearing that, I'm not important anymore. And at the same time, I'm not impinging on your privacy or on your space. So if you're able to put it in that way, and then, close it up with a positive close that, it's so nice that I was able to have this conversation and you were able to understand. I'm sure your kids will be able to understand. It's a beautiful approach. You start on a positive note, put in your concern in the middle, and close it on a positive note.
Can you repeat that, please? You said communication sandwich. Is that elaborated in the book?
Yes, you'll
Okay.
find it.
Can you just repeat those last few lines, Anubha?
So just like you have a sandwich, you've got 2 slices of bread and you've got the filling in between. You start on an appreciatory note. You have something to say which is genuine appreciation, not something made up. And then you put in your concern in a non-threatening way, not confronting again, not saying you are the problem or I am the problem or this is it. Put out your feelings. So a lot of the times you're not like putting out our feelings. We're using some justification or some logic to kind of at times express ourselves. So say, I really miss you.
Right.
I would like you to be a little more communicative. You put your concern there, and then you have a positive close. So he says, no, it's nothing like that. You're just getting paranoid. So you can always say, okay, fine. I understand that, we're not on the same page, but just once a week check in, just for me, just 5 minutes. So I'm sure he'll be able to agree to that. And then you can just have a positive close, which is that, it was so nice that I was able to talk to you about this and we were able to come up with something around it. So what you've done is you've again appreciated him for listening. So the next time he'll be more receptive and you've reinforced that.
I love that. I'm going to write it down and use it further.
Sure.
Anubha Mandeep says, thank you. Monalika is also saying thank you for taking up a question and answering it. Ruchi, I hope this really helps you, and I'm sure your son will definitely call you today. It's just a gut feeling. I have another question from Tanu Ahuja. She says, when a child asks for something, say a fitness band or a tablet in this case, I ask why he needs it, and he says because all his friends have it. How do we handle such a thought process?
So again, it depends on the age of the child. Like, for instance, if my 7-year-old will say my friend's got a tablet, or he's got a fit band, or he's got a cell phone, and you get it for me, my husband and I are on the same page that no, it's too soon. That till he's about 13 or something, or he's actually going out to classes and he needs it for communication, we're not going to give it to him. So one thing is that you need to be very mindful that what is the age of the child. If you feel that okay, fine, you can give it, then create some kind of rules around it. when would he be using it? How would he be using it? Will he be depositing it at night, to you, so that there is some kind of a supervision? Because even if it's like an early teen, let's say about 12 or 13, sometimes kids are going out for classes, not right now, but parents used to give it as a mode of communication. But if the child is constantly having the phone at 12 or 13, they end up getting hooked onto it because the whole time they are on chats or on calls with their friends. So it can be only when you're going for classes, you get it for that time, or you get it for 2 hours in the evening, or whatever it is. And then you have to deposit back. So have some rules around it. And those rules can be something which you negotiate with the child.
That's a great thought process. I have another question from Neha Garg Sharma. She says, my 8-year-old daughter just got glued onto a gadget. She's not interested in any kind of physical activity due to the pandemic, of course. There are restrictions, but how to handle such situations?
Okay, so this is also a common problem that when you're giving them the screen, they tend to get hooked on. So if it's your 8-year-old, so you have a conversation with them. Like, for instance, I had an issue with my 7-year-old also doing this, that he was, watching the, the telly for about 2 hours at times at a stretch. So my husband and I had a conversation with him that, look, we are a little concerned. If you're watching the screen too much, at times you're getting glasses, you're getting headaches. Sometimes, you'll start getting watering of the eyes. So these are things which can come up. So 8, 7, they're still amenable to, hearing your point of view, and they still value your opinion. And then we were able to say, okay, I don't want to stop it for you, but let's do this, that you're allowed this much of time, but let's have like half an hour of a mother daughter dancing session, or just like a little walk or something. We'll start with 10 minutes. We don't have to do a full-fledged activity thing. Let's start small. Let's start with a 5-minute walk or a 10-minute jog, or let's say a 10-minute dancing routine. We'll only dance on one song. So you slowly get that into the routine and then slowly increase it. But having a dialogue and also explaining to them that this is great, but it has these issues, the child is receptive to it. So we even sat down with our son. My husband even told him certain stories and showed him certain visuals where kids had glasses or they were having watering of eyes, and he said that's happened because of this.
Right.
So, and it was the same for even, dental hygiene. We showed them that at times, they get cavities and things like that with excessive sugar. So now they're very mindful that they have to brush their teeth twice. So if you have a conversation, if you have like a story inbuilt into it, or you can show certain visual, not too distressing, but in a way where the child can come around, you can always help them slowly graduate from the screen to physical exercise. It doesn't need to be like a very strong shift. Start with the 5-minute workout. Don't start with the 30-minute.
Right. Again, Shweta Sharma has asked this. Shweta, I think we've just answered that question. She says children are inclined more towards online games during this pandemic time. How to overcome this problem? But Anubha, I found like online games, especially this one called Amongst Us, which teenagers are playing, it's like a bonding exercise for them. So what's your take on that?
So games are a bonding exercise, and okay, fine, it stimulates, it helps them connect and everything, but too much of anything is a problem. So as you are the parent of the house, so you're supposed to act like the parent. You're not supposed to just act like an enabling friend and just give in to their demands. So a better conversation is that you sit with the person, with the child down, and you say, okay, great, it's a bonding experience, I get that, but we have to set some rules around it.
Right.
And I mean, keep yourself also as an example. So if you are, let's say, watching Netflix for 2 hours, the child can also tell you why you doing it and why are you restricting me. Or you're on the phone the whole time with your friends, and when I want to do that, you're restricting me. So set the example on your own also, and have a conversation and say, look, I don't want to stop you, but let's be responsible here. Let me come halfway, and why don't you come halfway? So you have your bonding experience for about an hour, but then, and do it at a time when you finished all this stuff, like the school work or whatever it is. Or if you finish if you feel that no, they are meeting at an earlier time and you have not been able to finish the work, finish it later. But this amount of work needs to be finished and you have to restrict yourself to this particular time. They'll heckle at you and they'll, call you names. But at times, we have to, you can always, blame me for being a bad parent and saying that, okay, mom isn't allowing. After a while, kids can push back like that, or just assert yourself and say, look, I need to finish some work. And, I've given my word to my mom.
Great, great. Yeah, like I always say, who's the mom? It's me. So, that's a question I get asked very often, Anubha, because I love to read. So it's the same thing. I always turn around and say, how much do you read, as a parent? And I see you've addressed that in the book as well, right? About reading. So what would you say? How do you get your child to read?
So, getting your child to read comes from you first. So, if you're picking up a book and reading, the child is likely to pick up a book. But if you're not, like for instance, my husband is an avid reader. So, my kids have seen it from a very young age, especially my daughter. So, at times, even if she doesn't know how to read a sentence, she's just opened the book and she's reading out. Like yesterday, she was just explaining the pictures to my husband. So, he was engaging with her. No, 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 it's really nice. The other bit is slowly graduate them. Like for instance, initially it should be about, you're reading to them, then it becomes you're reading with them, and then you're being read to by them. So every day, I mean, we have this thing at night that, we'll snuggle into bed, we'll pick up, both of them have one say about what they want to bring today to read, and then we are sitting together in the bed and then we read. I read first with my 4-year-old, and then I read then with my 7-year-old. My 7-year-old is now able to pick out sentences and read. So I sometimes encourage him that, would you like to read today, or why don't you read one sentence, I'll read one sentence.
That's
So
nice.
you graduate with them, not like, okay, you've learned a CBC word, so why don't you now tell me what does BAT mean, or just read it out. It should be an engaging process. The other thing which has helped a lot, and which I've seen in the West a lot, is we've got a pet at home.
Okay.
So my daughter sometimes reads to the pet. So just to encourage her to read, we were like, okay, fine, Elvis wants to listen to a story today. So why don't you read to him, or why don't you read this word to him? So in that way, they are able to read. So for special learners also abroad, they have trained dogs, especially Labradors, who are like, who are sitting with them. The child is slowly reading. The dog has his head in the child's lap, and he's giving them unconditional acceptance. And once they finish the reading program, they get like this paw stamped certificate by the dog. So I found that very interesting in one of the researches that I was reading through. So I've started applying that with my kids also. So if you've got a pet, why don't you get your child to read to the pet? The pet will not be very critical also if the child misses a word or two.
Yes, or mispronounces either. That's adorable. I never knew that. I have a question from Manisha Lokesh Sinha. She says, hi, my 5-year-old is very much emotional at points. She gets into anyone around so much that a simple ignorance hurts her a lot. She cries and gets irritated also. And she listens to me every time, but at that point, she becomes possessive and very arrogant.
Okay.
What would you advise?
I would suggest art. So art is a great vehicle to get kids to kind of open up. So why don't you sit with the child, pick out different media? They can use crayons, they can use color pencils, or they can use paints. And you tell them, okay, you make something, I'll make something. And while you're doing that, you have a conversation with them. So it's less threatening. And then you kind of get her to kind of talk about the fact that, sometimes I find that you get very upset or very clingy or very irritable, and you're crying, and mama feels very concerned that you're doing that. So, there's a great way to kind of communicate without getting upset. It is like, you tell me what you're feeling. So with my son, I used to also do this. Sometimes he's in a fit of anger or irritation. And at that time, instead of getting irritated or angry at him and saying, what is it that you really want and why aren't you expressing yourself? I tell him, see, I'm talking to you in a normal manner. I'm talking to you aram se. So he says, yeah. So I said, then you can express what's irritating you, what's upsetting you. I'm hearing you out. I have this time and I'm going to hear whatever you have to say. And then he calms down and he's able to tell me. And my daughter's picked on that. So sometimes when she's feeling angry, she'll come and say, I'm feeling angry. So I was like, okay, fine, you're feeling angry. Let's take the anger out. So either if it's like, if she's feeling like throwing things or whatever, I'll put a pillow in front of her and say, okay, let's bash this up together and get the anger out. So in that way, when you're getting them to express, it's a great way. The other way you can also do is something which you call the doll family approach. So you have dolls of different, like there's a male doll, a female doll if you are, a couple, and then you've got kids, like let's say with the brothers and sisters. So each doll represents a family member. And then you would help the child make a story around it. Like for instance, that, oh, today, this, she's having a little, get her to name the dolls. And then you can say, oh, today, she's getting very angry and irritated and she's crying a lot. What do you think? What is she feeling? Why is she getting upset? The child starts ascribing motives or whatever feelings to a doll because that's less threatening, that's easy, and gives you a glimpse into what's going on inside. And then you can take the concern and help them resolve it.
Lovely.
So we use art therapy and doll therapy or doll family with very little kids, especially ones who have difficulty with emotions and emotional regulation.
Great. I hope that helps you, Manisha. I have Ruchi, Astuti, and Neha thanking you, Anubha, for the advice you've given them. Tell me, Anubha, what are your thoughts? I think we've just addressed this on aggression in younger children, besides what Manisha asked.
So aggression is a reality, especially with the lockdown coming in, because you're confined, and it's not just with kids. You will notice it's also happening to us as adults. Spouses are fighting more. We are having a lot of disagreements. Parents and kids are fighting. Kids are getting aggressive on their own. So I don't think it's just about the kids as such. It's more about families also getting into that aggressive mode. So one thing with respect to aggression is, how do you handle it? It's not about shunning aggression, it's about channelizing it. Anger as an emotion is not bad, but excess of anything creates issues. So instead, if you're able to, help the child, let's say, come up with a relaxation routine every day, or let's say, when he wants to beat up or bash up something, instead of saying, no, you should not act out your anger, give them these things. Like, for instance, there are those inflatable, animals or something which come, so the kid can hit that and take the aggression out, and he feels much better, because some kids are more physically expressive. So it's not that don't feel scared that if he gets too used to hitting that animal, that he's going to keep on hitting others also. No, you're telling them that if you're getting very angry, instead of hitting your sister or hitting somebody else, it's always good to channelize it in this way. And slowly, as the child grows up, you come up with better ways. Like, for instance, they're able to communicate what they're feeling. So you're able to also help them solve the issue by coming up with alternative strategies. Like, for instance, writing about their feelings, or just, venting or saying whatever they have to say, but not to somebody, but just like a monologue, and get over with it, or vent to a friend and get over with it. Or if they are not able to, let's say, find a way around it, then you brainstorm about what are the possible solutions which can help address the problem and hence reduce the aggression. So it's all about channelizing aggression more than just shunning it and saying the child should not be aggressive. There is nothing like should not, or should be. So don't should yourselves, or don't like should the children also. It's okay for a child to get aggressive, but it's important for you to channelize.
Great. Manisha also says, thank you very much, Dr. Anubha, and she's going to try the advice you gave. And hopefully that will help you, Manisha. Anubha, I see you have an entire chapter in your book on single parenting, which I think is huge. So can you share some thoughts on single parenting?
So single parenting is a challenge at times, because, when both parents are there, sometimes we share a lot of responsibilities. But when one parent is handling everything, they're handling the house, they're handling the children, they're handling finances, it can get very emotionally overwhelming. And
Right.
we are constantly, trying to compare ourselves with others. So a lot of the time, the single parent is trying to be both parents. So they'll say, I'm mummy and papa both. It's okay to be mummy also and not be papa, and it's fine, or vice versa. So with single parenting, what happens is sometimes they swing in the pendulum of either indulging too much, or neglecting, because they're so tied up on different ends. So the chapters geared towards a encouraging the single parent to that you don't have to have it all or be it all, and you don't necessarily need a co-parent. At times, even grandparents, even your friends can step in and become like co-parents to your kids, and you can establish a very good support system so that you're able to bring up the child in a emotionally healthy manner or a physically healthy manner. You don't have to be like the buy all and end all. The second thing is, it's very important for you also to establish boundaries, because children also at some point, they are like, they have just one parent, so they're latching on all the time. So communicating boundaries that, okay, this is a little time when mama or papa need for themselves, and this is a time where we have our us time, or we can spend together. So in that way, when you're starting to delineate boundaries, you're not frustrated that you're not getting your space. The child isn't all the time latching onto you. The child learns to be a little independent, and you're also being a better parent. So it's all about that. The chapter is all about that, how to manage as a single parent and not get overwhelmed or feel that you're not doing enough, or it's bad that you have to be a single parent. Not at all. It can be a very empowering experience.
Great, great. Thank you for that, Anubha. I have Shakti Khanna who says, hi, Anubha. You're sharing very basic and good practical tips. Excellent session. I have Shamala Mukherjee who's saying, Sadhguru says that once your child is 21 years old, your responsibility finishes. Is that so? I am struggling as I feel I need to guide him still on things like profile building, applying to places. Am I right? Should I withdraw? Will I be doing more harm than good for his self-confidence?
Okay, so I'm not going to take it from a Vedantic perspective.
Of course.
I'm going to take it from a very basic perspective. See, the children in a collectivistic culture like ours are reared in a very different manner. And we are not right now following those, typical rules of brahmacharya where they are going out and they are with the guru and they're not staying here. So even though, okay, fine, the child should be emotionally mature by then, or should be on his own or on her own, but no two children are similar. Some children are very independent by the time they're 15 or 16, and they might be able to manage on their own. But if you feel that the 21-year-old still needs you, it's important to support him or her through the process, and slowly get him or her to get to a point where he or she is effectively able to make decisions without your let's say inputs also. So it's not about, again, it's not about either or. It's more about a continuum, seeing and being very perceptive to your child's needs. Certain children are more independent, certain children are more dependent. So if you feel that your child is more dependent, is needing those that support with applications, which is a harrowing process for a lot of the children, be there, support them, but at times encourage him or her to have like these pockets of decision making where he or she is making them independently.
Okay.
So as long as you're able to empower them and inculcate decision making and problem solving in them, they'll be good to go. If not at 21, then at 25 or 30.
I hope that helps, Shamla. I have a question from Parul Bhargava Sharma. She says, my son is 15 and very responsible, bright and intelligent. He's lived with responsibilities amongst expectations, but now he's not able to handle it. And the grandparents can't seem to, and I don't expect them to understand. He's become irritable. What can I do?
Okay, so you can have a conversation with your son about what are the challenges that he or he's experiencing right now. So one approach which I like to inculcate a lot in my therapy is called the problem solving approach. So a lot of the times why we are feeling frustrated or angry is because we're looking at one solution only, or one way to solve a problem. Or we are sometimes using certain coping skills which have, helped us in the past. But you need to revamp yourself and recalibrate. So whatever the issue is, let him write down the issue that he or she is struggling with. Then come up with different ways to solve that. So you can say, okay, fine, what are the ways in which you can, think of different ways that we can solve this issue? And I can offer my insights too. Then look at each of those solutions and see which is the most practical and viable solution, and which would have more benefits than costs. And then help him try that solution out. If that's not working, go back to your list and pick something else. So rather, a lot of the times, people get frustrated and angry because they're focusing too much on the why. Why did this happen? Why did she behave in this way? Why me? if you move from the why to the what, you will not get stuck. Instead of why did this happen, what can I do about it? Why me? What can I do differently? Why did she behave in this manner? I have no control over her, but how can I work out things at my level to make this person more amenable? So I would say change it from the why to the what, and you start using problem solving. If that doesn't work and you're hitting a roadblock, it's always a good idea that he can speak to a neutral person like a therapist and probably learn certain strategies.
Great. Thank you so much, Anubha. I have Jyoti Lakshmi who says, how can we identify sibling rivalry? I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. And at times I feel the elder one feels we love the younger one more. How can we fix it?
So sibling rivalry is a very, very natural phenomenon. It's basically that the child starts getting envious of the other by saying, oh, you're spending more time, or you're loving the other one more, or, let's say they start competing with the other one, saying, like, for instance, my daughter will say, no, 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 don't look at his drawing. My drawing is better. So sibling rivalry is basically reflected in these kind of statements of behavior, either getting too competitive with the sibling, or starting to hit the sibling a lot, or get very angry with the sibling, or saying statements like you prefer him or you prefer her over me. So a great way to fix it is giving exclusive time to each child. So a lot of the times, we have limited time also as working parents. So we are trying to, have both of them together, do activities together, or at times even prioritize the older child, thinking that no, 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 the younger one though will manage right now. The older one has more needs, is has more challenging academics to attend to. So instead of doing that, have like, okay, this is your time. Like, let's say, even if you just have 15 minutes in your day, split it up between 7.5, 7.5, or just like give 10 minutes that this is my time with him or her, and this is my time with you. So in that way, when they start getting exclusive time from you, they will not start making statements that you love him or you love her. The other thing is, whenever you're looking at two things and they're competing with each other, bring out the positives in both of them so that they don't feel that you're taking sides.
Great, great. My last question, Anubha, is how do you feel the work from home scenario has affected moms and intern children? In brief, I know it's a huge topic and I'm sure many people have asked you this.
So work from home has been a challenge because the first problem with work from home is you're not working from home, you're working all the time. So there's no cutoff. Earlier,
Correct.
it was like you came back from the office, they stopped calling you and bothering you. Now it's even happened with me. I've got clients sending me messages at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, thinking that there's like this continuum which is going on and you're available 24/7. Meetings are being organized after hours in corporates, even with schools and everything. So that whole work-life balance has gone for a total toss. Why it's affected people because they really don't know when to switch on and switch off. And with kids also, it's affected them in a negative way because they really don't know when they should approach the parent and when the parent will be available and when the parent will not be available. So because it's such a fluid kind of a dynamic and you cannot do much of the, you cannot do a lot of the problem solving if you're not an entrepreneur or a self-employed person and you're dependent on somebody who's making those decisions. I like to use a little analogy which helps to ease off not even the work from home situation, but it also helps gain perspective into our own lives. So a lot of the times what's happening is you're focusing too much on work being a problem instead of actually seeing that there's so many other areas also which are there which can be maximized on.
Right.
So Fasna, if I was to ask you, let's say I ask you to have a pizza, it's got no slices and you have to gobble it up all at once. What will happen? It's got all your favorite toppings. It's your favorite pizza. What will happen?
I'll overeat.
Okay, what else can happen? There are no slices here. You have to just
I would
in your mouth.
tear it apart and eat a bit and leave the rest, like try to divide it up.
And what if I say that, okay, the same pizza now has slices, but one slice has fallen on the floor? What will happen? Will you not be able to relish the pizza, or will it take away from your experience?
No, I would probably dump that slice and still have the rest.
So the pizza analogy is very, very important because a lot of the times we're eating the pizza without the slices. So we are focusing too much on only one aspect and thinking your life is all about that and trying to eat it, which is causing you mental indigestion.
Right.
So instead, if you split up your life into different domains, and you can also do this, you draw a circle, split it up into 6 segments, put in family, friends, work, fitness, your interests, finance, or any other thing, and then see how much of your week represents all of them. So if it's representing only one domain, you're in trouble, whether it's work from home or not at all. So if you're able to add certain elements to your day and even encourage children to add those different elements, you don't end up focusing on one element only. So let's say work's going miserably bad. There are so many other things also that you can take out. Let's say 10 minutes for family, it can help you just, revitalize and help you connect with your children rather than saying, oh, I've had such a bad meeting today. My client is calling at a indecent hour. And even if I had those 10 minutes, I would rather just binge watch on Netflix and be like, okay, I just need my space and get away from it. So if you realize that, your day is made up of those segments, or your week is made up of those segments, you're empowered and you don't end up feeling overwhelmed with that work from home scenario. So the pizza analogy has really helped me also balance, and it helps others also balance. And it's something you can teach your children very early on. Don't focus on only academics. Don't focus on only one domain. Split it up. And if one slice falls down, you can still enjoy it.
Enjoy the rest of it. I love it, Anubha. It's a lovely analogy. Even my colleague Astuti has agreed with me online. She says she's loved it. And Jyoti Lakshmi has said, thank you so much to you. It's very helpful what you've said. And I'm really grateful to you, Anubha, for sparing the time today and joining us. And thank you, Disha of Juggernaut Books. This book has been published. Sorry, I have a lot of sunlight now. By Juggernaut Books. It's called 5 Mistakes Parents Make. So Anubha is the author. And as you can see, she's given us some very wonderful and practical tips. So do pick it up if today's session has helped you. And I really appreciate it, Anubha. Thank you for your time. Wednesday upcoming is World Health Day, everybody. And we have an extremely interesting Facebook Live coming up. So stay tuned to the Gurgaon Moms Facebook public page and you'll learn more about it. That's Wednesday, 7th, which is another interesting Facebook Live. And thank you so much, all of you, for your questions and for tuning in. And thank you, Anubha, for being here today.
Thank you, Pasna. It was wonderful to chat with you today, and I'm really grateful to all the moms who participated and sent in their questions. I hope it helps them. Thank you so much for having me.
Most welcome. Thank you, everybody.